Long before the cameras turned toward him, Ibrahim Traoré was just a young man shaped by the dust, the struggle, and the unfiltered reality of the Sahel, a place where every sunrise is a reminder that survival is not granted, but earned. But even then, people around him sensed something different, something fierce, something unbreakable in his spirit. It wasn't ambition, it wasn't ego, it was purpose. Purpose born from watching his people live in a world where their suffering was normalized and their silence was expected. Purpose born from seeing villages isolated by fear, children robbed of innocence, and families fighting for a justice that never came. While others looked at these problems and shrugged, Traoré felt them like wounds carved into his own skin. And when the moment finally came, he did not step forward. He erupted. His rise was not planned, not calculated, not orchestrated by advisors or elites. It was the eruption of a man who simply refused to let his nation die quietly. And when he spoke, the world realized it had underestimated a soldier who carried more conviction in his voice than most leaders carry in their entire careers. There was no hesitation when he challenged foreign exploitation. There was no fear when he stood against systems designed to crush countries like Burkina Faso. His courage was not loud. It was steady, firm, grounded in truth. And that truth spread as fast as his words did. Across Africa, millions felt something they hadn't felt in decades: recognition. Here was a leader who spoke like them, walked like them, lived like them. A leader who wasn't polished for international approval, who didn't hide behind empty political language. A leader who spoke the language of the street, the village, the youth, the language of truth. Traoré became a storm without warning. His presence alone challenged the carefully built narratives that painted Africa as helpless, divided, doomed. He shattered that illusion in a single sentence: "We do not need permission to be free." And suddenly, the world realized it couldn't ignore him. He wasn't just changing Burkina Faso, he was changing the consciousness of an entire continent. From the markets of Bamako to the classrooms of Nairobi, from the streets of Lagos to the fields of Kinshasa, people began whispering the same thing: our leaders should be like him. Because Traoré represents something rare: leadership without fear, leadership without compromise, leadership without shame. He doesn't speak to impress the world, he speaks to wake Africa. That's why every speech feels like a spark dropped onto dry earth. Every step he takes feels like history being forced open. Every truth he reveals feels like a chain snapping. And the youth, the beating heart of Africa, are responding. They are rising, they are organizing, they are realizing that power does not come from waiting, it comes from standing. Traoré reminds them that Africa's liberation will not come from foreign hands or borrowed voices. It will come from the generation that refuses to bow. His rise is not just a moment, it is a mirror. A mirror forcing Africa to see what it can become. A mirror forcing the world to accept what it cannot stop. The more he speaks, the more millions understand a truth buried for far too long. Africa is not weak. Africa is awakening. Africa is not divided. Africa is reconnecting. Africa is not lost. Africa is rewriting its destiny. And as this awakening grows, so does the fear among those who benefited from Africa's silence. They see a future where African resources stay in African hands, where African decisions are made on African soil, where African youth shape their own destiny. And that future threatens the old order. But Traoré is not intimidated by threats. He has seen danger up close. He has walked through battlefields. He has faced death with the calm of a man who knows he is fighting for something bigger than himself. He knows that true freedom comes with a price, and he is ready to pay it. That is why people follow him with such loyalty. Not because he is perfect, not because he is unstoppable, but because he is willing to stand where others run. He is willing to speak where others hide. He is willing to risk everything so that his people do not have to risk their future. This is why the world is watching him with a mixture of fear and fascination. Because they know that if a leader like Traoré succeeds, a continent will rise behind him. They know that if his message spreads, their influence will shrink. They know that if Africa truly awakens, the global balance will shift forever. And that shift has already begun. You can feel it in the pride returning to African hearts. You can hear it in the chants echoing across cities. You can see it in the unity forming between countries that were once divided. Ibrahim Traoré did not rise from privilege, wealth, or political dynasties. He rose from the soil, from the dust, from the struggle, from the heartbeat of a continent that has been silenced for generations. His revolution did not begin with bullets. It began with a decision. The decision that Africa would no longer bow to fear, foreign control, or the weight of history that kept it chained to the past. When he spoke, he did not speak like a politician. He spoke like a mirror, reflecting the soul of an entire people. The frustration, the pain, the exhaustion, but also the fire that had been waiting for a leader young enough to understand it, brave enough to carry it, and unshakable enough to ignite it. And that is why the world cannot silence this movement. Because it is no longer a man standing against empires. It is a continent waking from a century-long sleep. It is millions of young Africans who suddenly understand that their future does not need permission. Their identity does not need approval. Their dignity does not need negotiation. They have realized that they are not weak, they are not dependent, they are not destined to lose. They were simply never allowed to understand their own power until now. Across villages, cities, deserts, and forests, youth hear Traoré speak and feel the same spark inside them, a spark that had been buried under years of poverty, corruption, exploitation, and hopelessness. They now see that the systems designed to keep Africa down are not invincible. They see that unity is stronger than intimidation. They see that courage is contagious, and once it spreads, it does not stop. The old way of ruling Africa, divide, manipulate, weaken, exploit, is collapsing faster than anyone expected, because this generation is not afraid to question what their parents were forced to accept. This generation is not afraid to challenge the world order their grandparents never had a voice in. And this generation is not afraid to rise, loudly, fearlessly, and publicly. That is why Ibrahim Traoré stands at the front of this storm. Not as a king, not as a dictator, not as a man seeking glory, but as a symbol, a living reminder that Africa's liberation was never meant to come from outside. It was always meant to come from within. He is the echo of a truth Africa once knew but forgot. We are enough. We have enough. We can do enough. He represents the breaking point, the moment where decades of silence turn into thunder, where centuries of extraction turn into resistance, where fear turns into unity. And that unity is what the world fears most, because an Africa that stands together is an Africa that cannot be controlled, cannot be exploited, and cannot be deceived. This is not a political moment. It is a spiritual awakening, a generational shift, a continental rebirth. And long after Ibrahim Traoré is gone, the wave he created will still be rising, carried by the millions who no longer walk with their heads down, but with their fists clenched, their voices loud, and their future finally in their own hands.